Hi, I'm Matt Lewis. A couple years ago, I became obsessed with something. It turns out that more than 50% of Congress are millionaires, compared to just 6 to 8% of the rest of us. Why is it that, even in America, the rich get elected and the elected get rich? That's the topic of my new book, Filthy Rich Politicians. Some people run for office for the same reason they buy rocket rides and sports teams. They're bored. The more concerning problem is why people who get elected almost always get richer. And even when they do leave office, the revolving door guarantees they keep raking in the dough. Order Filthy Rich Politicians today. Get the whole story and the solutions. Thank you.
Hello, Bill.
Good morning, Matt.
Welcome to the DMZ, everybody.
Taking a break from the jam-packed book tour for Filthy Rich Politicians. I'm amazed that you found a slot in the schedule to chat with me.
I am exhausted, Bill. It is not easy to hawk a book, even though nowadays you can do a lot of it from the comfort of your home studio.
You've not been on the road, correct?
Well, I mean, for me, now that I live in West Virginia, going to Washington, D.C. constitutes being on the road. So I've had a couple trips to D.C., but that's kind of the extent of it.
Is there a friendly neighborhood West Virginia bookstore that's going to have you?
Well, we actually had a book party in Shepherdstown, West Virginia on Sunday. That was kind of a friends and family party. And it was awesome. And the Four Seasons bookstore, not to be confused with Four Seasons Landscaping, the Four Seasons bookstore in Shepherdstown, West Virginia, was on hand selling books that I was signing.
Nice.
So yeah, so we kept it local, and in fact, we had a local bakery called Bolivar Bread provided the shitza, which is sort of like pizza pepperoni roll kind of stuff. We had a local.
Is this a West Virginia delicacy, or is this just this one bakery that does this?
It is a West Virginia thing.
Shitza.
I believe it is. Yeah.
I didn't know West Virginia had things.
They do. Like the pepperoni roll is obviously a big, like, kind of Italian, representation. Not necessarily in the part of the state I'm in, but
how big is the Italian population? I know Manchin's Italian.
I mean, our friend Michael Tomasky of the New Republic would be a representative of it. I don't know what the percentage is anymore, but it was definitely, think Pittsburgh, parts of West Virginia, where Morgantown, where West Virginia University is, are very close to Pittsburgh. So you get a similar vibe there.
Because that's not the rep, we don't think of West Virginia as where the Goombas live. Well,
I mean, famously, it was.
And I'm half Italian people. I can say that.
Yeah, well, it is a very Protestant state, as we recall from the 1960 Democratic primary. So, I think generally speaking, you're right. But there is some stuff. It's not like Maryland where you got the crab cakes, but there's some stuff. And we had a local Shepherdstown coffee shop provide, they do other stuff. And they provided like this really cool like lemonade. And then we had a local flower farmer who provided some amazing flowers. And it was co-hosted by my friend Van Applegate, who's a sort of photojournalist at CNBC, and my friend Brian Ellsworth, who runs a local music store where my son takes music lessons. So it was a community event, Bill.
Excellent. And I've seen you on all sorts of media platforms. Now, you and I talked about the book for the Washington Monthly, and that's going to be published in Q&A form, I think tomorrow, but I got to clean up the transcript and send it in. So we probably shouldn't talk too much about the book itself, since there's plenty of places people can do that.
But I will say, Bill, just the diversity of places I've been, and I'm afraid I'm sure I'll miss something, but like I've been on the Young Turks talking to Jank. I've been on David Pakman's podcast.
Pakman's a Northampton Zone, David Pakman.
Northampton Zone. We had a great conversation. And he's got, by the way, like a huge following. He just got a shout out from Howard Stern the other day.
I literally did Paquin's show when he was in high school out of the community radio station building down the street from me, and he's literally been like piecing together his social media empire since he was a teenager. It's amazing.
Yeah, he's blown up, and I told him off air that I'm very impressed and proud of him, and I didn't think he would do this good, frankly, because he's too sane. Normally to blow up in the YouTube world, you have to be a little bit eccentric.
The secret of Pac-Man, and I know we're getting way off track here. And I don't know if he did this deliberately or not. I sort of picked up on it. Like it's kind of like a Jerry Springer or Maury Povich kind of thing. At least when he started out, like he was always the same person interviewing the craziest people possible, and so that made for an interesting dynamic where he was sort of.
He's like a straight man.
He's like an everyman standing, like talking to all these crazy characters, but with much more of a political bent than you get in a Springer or a Povich type show. And so I think I think the model that has worked really well for it.
So I did Megyn Kelly's show. That was one of my best, I think. She really did a good job of highlighting the book. So thank you, Megyn Kelly. I was on Michael Malice's show. It's a friend of mine who's essentially an anarcho-capitalist. So, I guess considered to be on the right. We've taped a C-SPAN book notes with A.B. Stoddard interviewing me that hasn't aired. I was on Caitlin Collins's show, The View. It's called The Source on CNN. I was on Jake Tapper's show on CNN. I was on the 10 o'clock show that's normally Allison Camerata with Laura Coates. I was on Morning Joe. That's sort of where the book debuted. I was just on Stephanie Ruhl's MSNBC show, The 11th Hour, last night. And I'm sure I'm forgetting all sorts of, podcasts.
Is your Fox News suspension over? Are you allowed on Fox News?
Well, Will Cain, who I think seems like a good guy, had me on his Fox News podcast, but I cannot get on any Fox News TV shows, despite my best efforts. So if you know anybody out there, put in a good word.
I mean, Megyn Kelly is sort of Fox adjacent for former Fox.
Yes. Her show was great. Andrew Sullivan. I did like a 2-hour conversation with him. I literally had to stop in the middle and make hot tea and honey and with lemon to like survive that one. Just because it came at the end of my day and it was a 2-hour long show. So, I mean, I've been on every, show except for Jeopardy, basically in the past week and a half.
It's very exciting.
Our friend Mary Catherine Ham has a podcast. I think it's called Getting Hammered and something like that. So you name it, I've been there.
Did anyone give you a harder time in their questioning than me?
Yes. And here's one thing I learned about the book rollout or the book tour is, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't help you if someone has you on their show. It helps you if you have a good interview. Yeah. Or, I guess it's possible that a really bad interview that went viral. I forgot to mention, I was also on NPR's Morning Edition.
Steve Inskeep.
With Steve Inskeep. That's a big one. So I would say like the best interviews I had in terms of someone really kind of, and maybe this is just, they asked me the questions I was ready for. Maybe it's like I was in the zone, but I felt like, Morning Joe, Jake Tapper, and Megyn Kelly were my best interviews. The interviews that I don't think went as well were actually, with Jank and with David Pac-Man. And it's partly because I'm grateful that they had me on, but it's partly because after, each of them let me give my spiel. Oh, you know what? By the way, I keep forgetting. I forgot Jonah Goldberg's podcast, The Remnant, which is one of my favorites to listen to. That one I think was really good too. So check it out, The Remnant. But with the Young Turks and David, half the show was them sort of telling me why they disagree with the book. And I don't think that really helps, in my opinion. Like, and so in the case of Jank, for example, he essentially was making the point that, like, yeah, the stuff you talk about, Matt's true, but it's just scratching the surface. The real issue is campaign finance reform. We have to get all the money out of politics and go to public financing or something like that. But my book's not about that at all,
Right.
for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is I tried to pick reforms that I thought were like implementable without a constitutional amendment.
Right.
So anyway, but it has been a spectrum, a wide variety of shows, left, right, and center that I've done. And if I seem even less coherent than normal, Bill, it is because I'm exhausted, and I'm normally in bed at 8 o'clock, tucked in with my Girl Scout, uniform pressed neatly folded. And last night I was on the 11th hour of the 11th hour. So I'm still recovering.
Well, while you've been taking off, Ron DeSantis has been sputtering down the runway. We've talked about DeSantis a lot on this show. I find myself tweeting about or Xing, I guess, DeSantis a lot, more than I probably should. It's probably boring, but I just find it's a never-ending. When someone is falling apart, it's fun to kick them while they're going down, and it just seems like an endless supply of case studies of failed campaigning to pick over. But are you at all surprised that he's having this hard a time?
No, not at all, Bill. You were way ahead of the curve saying like, well, maybe Ron DeSantis shouldn't run. Did you write that back in March?
I wrote that in April. I wrote that he should take a pass, that he had the theory of the case wrong. I mean, with the small caveat that if he completely restructured what his strategy was going to be and went at Trump in a much more holistic way, fine. But the I'm Trump-like but more competent strategy had clear evidence of not clicking. And we've talked about one reboot after another with DeSantis. Like, there's no rebooting. It's the same campaign.
Yes.
Like, maybe he's going on a different TV show, but like the strategy is the same. I'm a more competent Trump every single time. Or I'm a more conservative Trump. Like, that's the Ted Cruz strategy that failed 8 years ago. And surprise, surprise, he's got Ted Cruz people surrounding him on his campaign staff. So I always thought he had the theory of the case wrong, and nothing that's happened since has changed my mind.
So you made that point in April. You and I had that discussion here. I think I pushed back a little bit. I think I thought you were being maybe premature or a little too harsh. And then within 2 weeks, Bill, I think I probably wrote my piece at the Daily Beast saying DeSantis should not run. As is often the case, you talk, enlightened me, and I started thinking about what you had to say.
I just did another podcast called Politics with Justin Young. We talked about this for a very long time, so I won't go over everything I said. But one point that I made, one of the pushbacks that I got, I think most prominently from Ross Duth. I think Ross Duth had said this in the Times. That he had to, because this is his moment, and the Trump fatigue factor could still come. And I think he wrote recently that we still could get Trump fatigue. We shouldn't say definitively that won't happen, because the Chris Christie strategy isn't working. So why should we assume that going at him with the 2x4 is the way to go? And I think and I did not think this at the time. So I'm not trying to argue that I was all knowing. But I think in retrospect, if DeSantis had a moment, it was between November and January. It was not February, March, April. There was a moment when Trump's numbers sagged after the midterm, and there was a lot of commentary from a pretty broad swath of Republicans that Trump's meddling in Republican primaries was unhelpful to the party. And that's where the Trump-DeSantis margin became narrowest. Now, and DeSantis' thinking at the time, which I think at the time was justifiable, was Trump's on the decline. Let's keep our hands clean of it and let happen organically while we spend the next 5 months racking up wins in the Florida legislature. a logical conclusion to make at that moment, but disproven by March when DeSantis started his book tour and Trump got indicted. So, again, but I think if DeSantis was smarter than almost anybody else and said in December, I'm going to announce, I'm going to drive the stake into Trump while he's on the decline and say this midterm is his fault. He is toxic. He is dead weight. We've already had tons of wins in Florida. I look at what I did in Florida in this midterm. I'm the success story. He's the loser. You know, onward to 2024, that could have been different.
Maybe, but I will say this, because I think that what you've just described, the so-called moment that Ron DeSantis had, was largely about Donald Trump. It was about Donald Trump being weakened. And in contrast, Ron DeSantis having won an election, but it's not about people liking Ron DeSantis. And that, to me, that is what changed my mind about Ron DeSantis. It's that I think on paper, he had a very plausible argument. Donald Trump is a loser. Donald Trump lost in 2020. Donald Trump just cost Republicans yet another midterm. Donald Trump, is a liability. Donald Trump never really achieved any. He didn't build the wall. So DeSantis, by contrast, is younger, is more competent, and is actually a winner in terms of having won in Florida. But then the problem, I think the fundamental problem, and the thing that changed my mind, is not about DeSantis's strategy or failure to attack Trump. It's about the fact that Ron DeSantis is utterly unlikable. He has no charisma. He's not, you do not like him. And honestly, I'm finding myself liking Donald Trump more, like in contrast. Like
this is going to upset the filthy rich politicians pitch if you start talking up Donald Trump.
No, I think there's a weird psychological thing happening, and I wonder if it's just me or if this is with other people too. But obviously, I've been a major Trump critic for a long, long time. I think Trump is uniquely dangerous. Having said that, when I look at people like Ron DeSantis, who are saying just as mean things as Trump, and yet lacking the charm, lacking the humor that Trump has, lacking the authenticity. I mean, Trump lies all the time, and yet he is kind of authentic. He's an honest liar, as Dave Chappelle said, and I see other people doing it. Vivek Ramaswamy is clearly, like a bad actor, but he's also ambitious and phony. So at least and he lacks the humor of Trump. So I think there's this weird thing happening where people, and even Nikki Haley with her cloying, furrowed brow. It's like, okay, fine, give me the funny guy at least. Maybe he's horrible, but he's not a phony. So anyway, I'm having this weird.
I'd push back on you slightly. I think DeSantis is a bad general election candidate for a lot of the reasons that you just said. But his favorable rating amongst Republicans is still quite good, really good. So I think the problem with taking down Trump is that it requires not just one person making the critique. Like Chris Christie doing it by himself is in no way sufficient. I don't even think even having, maybe if you had every presidential candidate doing it, you'd get more traction. But even then, there's obvious self-interest there. You need it to go beyond just who's running for office, and it's got to be with a wider swath of Republicans in the party. It's got to puncture the conservative media echo chamber. So even someone who is, Trump sympathetic can get into that person's head. Yeah, I like the guy, but boy, he's sure going to be dead weight in November 2024. I don't know if we can do it this time around. And I think there was the inklings of that in November, December, that got shut down after the indictment. And this is where I think Trump was very canny. the smartest thing Trump has done this whole campaign is announcing the indictments himself before they are formally announced. And so he sets the narrative about that indictment, at least amongst his fellow travelers, amongst Republicans, and gets them riled up right out of the box. And so it becomes much, much harder for another Republican to cut against that grain because you're asking for a lot of heat once Trump has fired the first shot. And if Trump could have been more severely weakened before the indictment, because DeSantis got in and he got other Republicans to at least echo the critique, it might have been a different story.
I still, I don't want to get into a huge argument about this, but I still think likability. Ron DeSantis is promising to retool and reboot with a leaner, meaner campaign. I'm not sure how it could be meaner. Like leaner, yes, they fired a lot of people. Meaner, I'm not sure. Bill, I cannot think of a politician, a successful politician, maybe Hillary Clinton. Although I think Hillary can be a little charming on occasion. She was charming on Howard Stern's show. But I can't think of a less likable major politician. I mean, Barack Obama had charm. Bill Clinton oozed charisma, right? Ronald Reagan, come on, the guys should be on Mount Rushmore. George W. Bush was he doesn't drink, but you'd love to have a beer with him anyway. You know what I mean? Even John McCain, and Mitt Romney seems like a nice guy. He's nerdy, but Ron DeSantis seems humorless, mean, not funny. I don't think he's a good hang. I'm just going to say it. I think it matters. I think it really matters. And Trump seems fun, by the way. I mean, I know, losing your democracy may not be a blast. Storming the Capitol, that is definitely a buzzkill. But he's got this shtick, that's like very Jackie Mason. I don't know who, to compare it to, but he's got this shtick.
I mean, it's certainly possible that DeSantis would never have the legs to go all the way, either in the primary or the general, because of all the reasons you state. I don't think he's a likable candidate. That's not my case. But I think at minimum, he could have punctured the Trump balloon if he went in earlier and encouraged other Republicans to feel it was okay to tell other Republicans Trump's bad for our party, no matter how much you might like him or feel bad for him that he's facing legal troubles. He is not helpful to us. And now you got Chris Christie and Asa Hutchinson stuck making that case, and everyone else is scared to do it.
I mentioned the reboot bill. So they're firing a bunch of people. There's like a high overhead, high burn rate, the kind of stuff that Scott Walker kind of lost his front runner status over back in 2016. So, I mean, it probably is smart that they're doing this. But one of the people who got let go was Nate Hochman, I'm not sure, even though he's been on my podcast no less than 2 times.
You still can't pronounce his last name.
It's either Hochman or Hotchman, but I don't know how to pronounce Ben Dominic's name either. So it's it's not an insult. But this is an interesting story. Nate Hotchman, we'll call him, was a young up-and-coming conservative that seemed to bridge the gap between mainstream conservatism and the new right, kind of nationalism. And I had him on my podcast before, kind of when he was like a college student, I think, or right after college, the first time. And I think he was like a Claremont fellow or something. He was working at National Review. He had a column or an op-ed or something that got published about a year ago in the New York Times for someone who was like in his, I think, early 20s. That was very prestigious. And I think he was, and maybe still is, I don't know, was poised to be kind of an up and coming conservative star, representing someone who could speak about the new right in a, you know, in a way, or kind of represent the Josh Hawley, J.D. Vance kind of wing in a way that I certainly can't. He was obviously partial to Ron DeSantis. He was involved in a controversy having to do with Twitter Spaces. I don't know if you remember this. I don't remember the details. So he has been involved in a controversy where I think he was talking to someone who was like a white nationalist or something, and he seemed to maybe throw this person softballs. And anyway, I don't remember the details, but the most recent thing is he was just fired. He was like a speechwriter for Ron DeSantis. And I think this speaks to Ron DeSantis being very online and being very weird in some of these videos that are being produced and promoted by the Ron DeSantis world, and in some cases, the Ron DeSantis campaign. So anyway, this guy was fired for, I guess, producing and promoting this video that had some Nazi imagery in it. And to me, I mean, I'm sure it tells us something about the DeSantis campaign, but to me, it's also a cautionary tale. Like, this was a young guy who seemed to be poised to really bridge the gap between mainstream conservatism and the new right. And I feel like maybe he went a little too far in the new right direction.
But I mean, we're at a place now where DeSantis is essentially shifting blame to staff by firing staff and not acknowledging the flaws in his own strategic thinking. You know, there's been this, we've seen in the past 24 hours that Nate and others got fired because the campaign was too online. You know, New York Times profile of DeSantis last year talked about how his staff was, you know, tracking libs of TikTok to pick up on things for DeSantis to get upset about. I mean, this has been an online operation for a very long time. And it's, and in many ways helped him get to where he got to be. I always thought it was weird. I always thought it was not a good long-term strategy, but then I sort of second-guessed myself because he won re-election by nearly 20 points. So it's not like, I mean, I don't know how rogue he was going, this guy Nate, in producing these videos, but he, in no way was he out of step with the thinking of DeSantis going back several months, even before he announced. You know, DeSantis has leaned into every controversy ever since he ran for governor the first time. So I just don't think that DeSantis as a human being has figured out, or is willing to figure out, that this is something that both you and I have previously stated. The race is Trump or no Trump. Like, that is the choice that is on the minds of Republican voters. Trump makes these campaigns about him. When he gets indicted, he makes this about him. Are you with me or against me? And no one cares about your border plan or your tax plan or your DEI plan or what you're doing with Disney or Bud Light or whatever, until you get past the question, Trump or not Trump. That's all irrelevant. And all the wacky videos you make are not going to change that.
But these videos too, just I mean, if you haven't seen it, I mean, I'm sure everyone has seen the one video that kind of tries to get to the right of Donald Trump and cast Donald Trump as being pro-trans rights or whatever. But like, these videos are bizarre. Okay, I mean, it's not Pepe the Frog, but it's like memes like that, like quick shots of like weird pop culture memes that I don't know what they are, and I'm not 100 years old, and I'm a political columnist who, I mean, I would assume I follow this fairly closely, and you would think that, like, how on earth does some guy who lives in Davenport, Iowa, know what the hell these videos are about? They seem utterly bizarre, like flashes of like pop culture imagery, and in some cases, perhaps Third Reich imagery that I don't even know what they are. But, you know, presumably some, you know, like Blake Masters is watching these in Arizona, applauding. Like, who knows what these things are? And even if there is a contingent of very online, highly educated young white dudes who love this stuff, like, how does it play in Peoria? Like, does anyone in Des Moines have any idea what this is? And when they see it, doesn't it turn them off? Don't they think it's just bizarre?
But this starts at the top. DeSantis starting his campaign on Elon Musk's Twitter Spaces and talking about all these obscure issues that what I've described as a Republican wine track cares about. He's always been stuck in that niche, which is not enough to win a Republican primary, let alone a general election.
Crack track or the meth track. I think the problem with the wine track is, even though I know what you're getting at, what these are, Ivy League educated weirdos in many cases, but wine implies a sort of suburban normalcy. We need a different word for this.
I don't know what there is a legal substance of choice. I know Musk likes the ketamine, but maybe it's the ketamine
track. I like that.
I don't know if Musk's use of ketamine is a real selling point, considering how he's handling his business these days.
Well, the other day I was on Twitter and I kept getting alerts that I was getting tweets, but I couldn't. I'm like, my browser's shut. Like the tab's shut down. I don't have Twitter open. And then I realized that they had changed it to X.
Mm-hmm.
Like, not only have they changed the branding to X, but even like the little tab looks different now. I couldn't. So I'm trying hard, in the midst of this book tour, to keep up with changing pop culture, Bill. And we know it's just a matter of time before you and I both completely lose touch, because the Elon Musks and Nate Hockmans of the world have got Pepe the Frog everywhere, and
where are you on now? X
and
versus...
we're still talking about Dick Gephardt and Tom Daschle.
Where are you on X versus Threads?
Well, I'm the last person to ask, because I like Threads, and I would have liked to have had the luxury of kind of transitioning to Threads, but because I'm in this book tour trying to like sell books and leverage my platform to whatever degree I can to get people to buy Filthy Rich Politicians, I've essentially just been on Twitter, partly because that's where I have the most followers, and but who knows if they see my stuff? That's the problem, Bill. In the olden days, you would have seen, if you followed me, you would have seen me tweeting. Now I don't even know if people see what I'm tweeting. And I'm tweeting into the void occasionally.
Well, I mean, Twitter, X, they still have the chronological feed.
But it's all like the algorithm, isn't it? I mean,
if you're stuck on the For You tab, then you're getting the algorithm.
I see.
But I mean, I never use the For You tab. I mean,
it keep by default putting you back to For You?
But, I mean, now I can't regularly use TweetDeck, and so I won't be able to use TweetDeck at all. And that was how I have like a whole bunch of lists. That's how I handle Twitter. I have a journalist list. I have a White House congressional correspondence list. I have a liberals list. I have a conservatives list. I have a list for certain publications. I have a Matt Lewis list. This is how I keep track of things, and it was all on one board, and so you can kind of, multitask very easily. So that's being taken away from me. I got to pay for that if I want to use that going forward. I still have my list, but I have to toggle between them on the Twitter app, either on the desktop or on the phone. But when I'm on my journalist list, that's still coming in chronologically. That's not coming in via algorithm. And so I can sit on that all day and track news as it breaks and react to it in real time. I can't do that on Threads as it stands. Supposedly these more features are coming, but until there's a chronological feed, I mean, I also would really want to see lists, be able to make lists there. But at minimum, without a chronological feed, I can't follow news there. And when I post there, I can't be confident that my followers see it in real time. So I am desperate to get out of the clutches of Elon Musk. Like X in some ways is just a symbolic name change. Maybe who cares? But it's part of some sort of larger strategy on Musk to like make this an everything app that handles your finances and take over the universe. Like I'm not signing on to like help Elon Musk take over the universe. So I want to get out, but Threads needs to get more features very quickly if it's going to take advantage of this moment, I think.
Yeah, I heard that he was like pushed out of PayPal or something because he tried to do this. That maybe it was PayPal, some other famous.
Yeah, no,
app.
he wanted to change PayPal to X.com. I don't know if that was the only reason why he got pushed out, but he tried to do that. It didn't work.
And I also heard that like Meta and Microsoft both have claims to the name X.
Yeah, I saw that. I don't know how serious that is or if it's going to really come to litigation or not.
But let me just say, like, in recent years, I've become very hostile to these tech bros and finance bros. Whether it's like Josh Hawley or Elon Musk or Peter Thiel, there just seems to be like a proliferation of these very, I don't even want to say young anymore, right? I mean, like some of these guys aren't really, they're kind of Gen X, middle age now like us, but they're very smug and they seem to be very self-righteous and utterly convinced that they know what's right. And I just think they completely lack wisdom. And I'm guessing that, you know, entrepreneurs and folks were always weirdos, but maybe we just didn't know it before social media. But man,
well, there's always been eccentrics, but you know, Musk seems to be of, you know, a very high order to the point where, I mean, he doesn't seem to be making decisions that make business sense.
And this Vivek Ramaswamy is right in line with all of them, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, I mean,
obviously smart.
This is more of a vanity project for Ramaswamy, and it's just, I mean, like having a rich guy want to run for office and spend his money on, like, that's not new. I think it's very weird for someone to buy. I granted, Twitter was not making money, so you can say it wasn't a thriving company, but it clearly had an audience. It clearly had some successes. It had people that really liked the product. Buy it for $44 billion and proceed to take away features that people liked and actively berate the staff that put it together, insult the customers, and narrow the people that have affinity towards the product. Like, that makes it seem not just an ego trip, but an anti-capitalist ego trip. You're not doing things that normal level-headed business people would do.
Yeah. And that's what bugs me just from a personal standpoint. And that's my problem with modernity. I mean, and I realize, you know, like, this is why when people get to be like 80 or 90 years old, they're like, I'm ready to go home to be with the Lord because I don't want to be here anymore. Like, everything that I've known my whole life about that I've learned, whether it's Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, or Peter Drucker, or Stephen Covey, or John Maxwell, Viktor Frankl, I don't know, anyone who's written about wisdom and life and leadership and even business have espoused certain values that are utterly out of step with the Trump era and with the Elon Musk and Peter Thiel and Vivek Ramaswamy. Like, all of these people who are wildly successful, and I realize a lot of them started off on third base and think they hit a triple, but still, I'm more than willing to adapt to like new technology and a changing world. But I always thought that there were fundamental values that had to do with human nature that were immutable. And I still believe that that's true, but not to the degree I thought it was in terms of success in the business world. Those have dramatically changed.
To segue a bit, we didn't talk about this beforehand. Have you seen Barbie?
I have not seen Barbie or Oppenheimer yet.
I didn't get to Oppenheimer. We'll like to see Oppenheimer, but this is the first time I went to an opening weekend for a movie. I can't remember when I did that last. Certainly not ever since I had children, and I think probably several years even before that. So it's fun to do it with the full family.
That sounds fun. Yeah.
I mean, we've occasionally gone to the theater with the kids, but it's pretty rare, and more rare to even do it with like a large crowd. You know, because you go to movies most of the time now. It's you got like 5 people in the theater. It's not the same experience of excitement. And so it's sort of nice to kind of give them a taste of what it used to be like to go to the movies. And, you know, I kept away from, you know, reading reviews and stuff. So I didn't know, and I don't want to give spoilers here. But I was surprised at how overtly political, the movie was, and really, you know, tackling gender politics head on. And so it does get into a lot of this kind of, you know, bro culture that we're talking about here with Musk. That's why I bring it up. I don't need to go deep into it if you haven't seen it yet.
Bill, will you be burning Barbies like Ben Shapiro? You will not be doing that. Did you dress like Ken?
We all 3 of us wore pink, including myself. I have one pink T-shirt that I wore. I don't want to say strange, but I mean, Shapiro is one of these people that really was pushing the go woke, go broke argument that these, I mean, it's sort of like it's the flip side of the Musk argument. All these big corporations are bending over backwards to do woke content for political reasons, even though they don't make money. And so every time some movie came out that had a liberal bent that was a bust, Shapiro and others would guffaw. I'd be like, this proves the point that no one wants this. No one wants to see these types of movies or these types of TV shows or what have you. And Barbie disproves the point. I mean, not every liberal themed movie is going to do well. I mean, there's a question about movie quality. If it's a funny movie, then that has liberal themes is going to do well. If it's a not funny movie that's trying to be funny, then it's not going to do well.
Okay, without spoilers, like, is it just? I mean, if it's just about female empowerment, I wouldn't consider that woke at all. Or is
this? I mean, not that I'm a fan of using the term woke, but like, by any definition, you would call this a woke movie. I mean, it is heavy into the types of things that the right would call woke. Okay. But it's a genuinely good, funny movie. It is genuinely entertaining. I mean, The Incredibles, I think we've talked about a couple of times before, like, that has, you know, not too close to far from the surface libertarian themes.
Right.
Which I don't care for, but it's a genuinely entertaining movie, and I can't deny that.
Well, that's what surprises me, is that I'm surprised that Barbie is actually a good movie, because, you know, a lot of times when you have the IP, you're going to sell tickets. It doesn't have to be a good movie. It's like a resource curse almost. And so you just make a crappy movie because everyone's going to go see it opening night, and you cash in. You don't have to go to the trouble of actually writing a good film. So I'm happy to hear, whether I agree with the political agenda or not, that it's actually well made.
I mean, I didn't sit through the whole 43 minutes of Ben Shapiro destroying Barbie because I have a life, but I was curious, because I watched it for maybe like 60 seconds, and I could see he was just straining really hard to complain about the movie structure as well as the politics of it, to sort of make the argument that they didn't do a good job making this movie. This was a sort of slapdash affair. And I'm sure, like any blockbuster type movie, like, is the plot airtight? No, but I can say that about 99% of summer blockbusters. I
mean, it's not Citizen Kane, but come on,
right? But there's definitely thought here. Like, it is not a slapdash political diatribe. It is intricate and multi-layered, and it's a movie musical, and it's funny. And the performances are great, and the dance numbers are great. I mean, if you didn't like it, you didn't like it. I mean, I'm not saying it's going to be universally praised, but I think objectively speaking, it's a quality product, not a slapdash product.
What I want to know is, my 12-year-old has read Richard Feynman's book. Richard Feynman, is that right?
I don't know.
Anyway, I'm very sleep deprived, but Dr. Feynman, his book many times. He was involved in like the Manhattan Project. So, and Oppenheimer's featured in the book.
Yeah.
And I want to know if I could take my 12-year-old to see this movie, because obviously it's got some dark themes.
Right.
So if anyone out there has seen Oppenheimer,
but let's also keep in mind that your 12-year-olds might not be anybody else's 12-year-olds. So
that's true. My 12-year-old is 12 going on 25.
Like, what's the darkest thing your 12-year-old has seen?
Well, God knows what he's seen that I'm not aware of. But like we watched, what's the movie where with Ben Affleck about the Argo? Like, we've seen Argo, we've seen First Blood, the Stallone movie, we've seen Red Dawn. I don't know what this body count.
Which Red Dawn?
The classic, Bill. All
right,
of course. So if the body counts, it's up there.
But I assume Oppenheimer's not a body count movie.
Yeah,
it's more a question of emotional darkness.
Psychological stuff could be more disturbing than
is your kid going to walk out of the movie thinking we are doomed as a planet, and have that affect their well-being afterwards?
Exactly. Now, he's a very deep thinking, philosophical, and you know what's cool, man? There are all these YouTube shows that it's not all crap. I mean, some of them really challenge your thinking. We watch them together. They're made for kids, but I get caught up. One's called Film Theory. One's called I can't even remember. But anyway, so he's a smart kid, but I don't want to give him a complex. So should I take him or not?
Now, did you see? How much younger are you than me? What's your age now?
I'm 48.
Oh, so you're 2 years younger.
48.
So, did you see The Day After?
No, but I remember. So when I was like in 5th grade, I think it came out. Maybe
I should say I didn't see The Day After.
Neither did I. But it was
no. You were younger. The Day After was 80. I want to say 83.
Okay.
So you were younger than 5th grade.
That's probably 8 or 9. But everyone was talking about it, and there were kids in my class who did see it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I remember because I didn't see it. Of course, back in the day, if you didn't see it, you didn't see it. You couldn't go back and watch it.
Yes.
The next day. And I recently went back and looked at the TV guide for that day. Like, what did I watch if it wasn't The Day After? And I think it was like Facts of Life Goes to Paris or something like that. But yeah, I remember the talk around it, and I remember being very affected by fears of nuclear war throughout my childhood. And I recently, in reading Reagan biography, said Reagan was affected by The Day After.
Yes,
and it definitely put him in a mindset of, okay, I got to find a way out of this nuclear stalemate with the Soviet Union, which it didn't immediately change because Gorbachev wasn't in power yet, but it affected his dealings with Gorbachev.
There's a little book I would recommend to you. It's called Movie Night with the Reagans. It came out about 5 years ago, and it's written by a guy who was a very young communication staffer, and his job was, the senior staff had weekends off typically. So this guy's job was to go with the Reagans to Camp David every weekend, in case Reagan wanted to write a speech or if something happened. And they would watch movies together. Like Reagan would host, they would watch they watched war games together. They watched Ferris Bueller's Day Off together. Apparently a lot of Matthew Broderick movies together. And each chapter is a different movie that they watch. I think On Golden Pond might have been one of them.
I got to correct myself, Matt.
Yes.
It wasn't Facts Life Goes to Paris. It was the episode of Alice where Vera gets married.
I didn't even know Vera got married.
I would bet dollars to donuts that that's what I watched that night. There also was an NBC miniseries about the Kennedys, which I don't think I would have watched.
No, we probably both watched Alice. Let's be very honest about that.
It's a two-parter.
Yeah, come on. Anyway, check out. This is an easy read, but I would recommend it. I think you'd like it a lot, Bill. Movie Nights with the Reagans.
Good recommendation. We probably should stop here. But there's one other topic I want to ask you about, and we didn't prep this in advance, but I realize I do want to get your take on it. No labels. No labels and Cornel West with the Green Party. Do you think these third-party efforts are going to be a major obstacle for Joe Biden?
Well, look, the polling right now amazingly shows that they would help Biden.
There's one poll. There's the one Monmouth poll that said that. Well, and that only tested the it tested a generic third-party ticket and then tested a Joe Manchin, John Huntsman ticket. It didn't work Cornel West into that mix.
Well, let me give you just my general take then. Overall, I would be open to going to some sort of a ranked choice voting.
Well, we're not going to get that.
Well, not anytime soon,
Yeah.
but I'm just saying, philosophically, theoretically, I like that idea, because then you could vote for the candidate of your choice without a spoiler problem. But until that happens, I don't like this. It's sort of like in the Super Bowl, right? You don't want a referee to make a call at the end of the game that is dispositive, that changes the potential outcome. You know, Trump versus Biden is a serious, high stakes affair. I don't want any external variables to influence who wins that. And so I'm just generally speaking opposed to, as of now, these potential third-party efforts.
But you are genuinely concerned that they could eat into an anti-Trump majority for Joe Biden.
Even though that poll shows the opposite, my assumption is that it hurts Biden. But regardless of who it helps or hurts, I don't want some weird fluke like Ralph Nader being on the ballot or people voting for Pat Buchanan by accident to influence this. It's a big, big decision the American public is probably going to make. It's probably going to be Biden versus Trump. I think you and I probably agree on that. I don't want there to be any weird variables that could influence the outcome. Like, that's a big choice. Let's have the American public decide on that.
I mean, I agree with everything you said. Of course, the problem is that Cornel West and No Labels don't seem to agree with that line of thinking.
Yes.
And we can't make them do what we want them to do. Now, maybe No Labels can be psyched out. Maybe enough pressure can be put to bear on No Labels. Doesn't seem like it at the moment, but clearly it's what people like the folks at Third Way and there are other groups that are propping up, trying to essentially, scream into their eardrums like your logic makes no sense. Like they've said, like, well, if it's not Biden Trump, then we won't do it. Like, what are you talking? Like, why is that be that configuration?
Well, I think their argument is that these are two very bad candidates. I mean, you've got one guy who's 1 million years old and clearly lost a step, and you've got another guy who tried to stop the free, peaceful transfer of power.
These critiques are not equivalent. That's what's nuts about it. That you're saying, well, we think they're both. It's a Green Party type argument. They're both equivalently bad. But if it was Biden and DeSantis, they're not equivalently bad. So someone DeSantis is so Biden is ineligible no matter what. But only Trump is so bad that we would come in if it was DeSantis or Vivek.
Yeah, look, I think their rationale is that the American public deserves better than an old guy who has clearly lost a step.
But
Donald
who
Trump.
do they have to offer?
Yeah. Well, I'm with you. I'm with you, Bill. I'm just telling you what I think. That is their rationale.
Well, that's their rationale, but their rationale doesn't make any sense. It's a self-serving rationale that doesn't actually add up, which I think the critics are trying to sort of beat into them so they snap out of it. But so far, they're not snapping out of it. The Green Party types forever say the Democrats and Republicans are equivalently bad. So you're never going to crack that nut. But the Green Party has had a hard time getting onto all 50 state ballots, and only made an impact in 2000 when the race was so hair-splittingly close, which maybe would happen this time around. Therefore, would be an issue. But the Green Party folks have a point that a good number of Green Party voters would not vote for either candidate no matter what. Just that Florida and New Hampshire 2000 were like literally like dead even ties that a handful of folks would make a difference. What I think is weird about, the main things that are weird about no labels is they don't have a candidate. They're going on a wing and a prayer that some ticket's going to materialize that everyone's going to love so much. But there's names being bandied about that have no obvious currency with a wide swath of the public. And the best examples of third-party candidacies, which, of course, didn't even win, but your high watermarks are, Ross Perot and Teddy Roosevelt. And then after that, George Wallace. These are people who had high personal profiles, had certain charisma, and had issue sets that were distinct. It wasn't some sort of committee product mush that no labels put out a platform that is just mush to try to appeal to everybody. They don't have anyone being named that has anything remotely close to the personal connection that Perot and Roosevelt and Wallace had with any niche of the American public. So why would you think you're going to be the ones to pick this lock? It's based on the notion that Biden and Trump are so universally disliked that they'll take almost just any random combination you put up there. And you're just cherry picking poll numbers to make that point. There are a lot of people going to vote for Biden and Trump in a 3-way, 4-way race. They're probably both going to clear 40%, if not 50 for one of them. So it's all very based on like the thinnest cherry picking of poll data. But of course, if they can't connect the dots themselves, they're going to do it anyway. We're all going to have to, make the best of it.
Indeed. I just hope that they don't mess something up inadvertently. This should, this is a big decision, and I don't want there to be some fluke that throws one state bill could be the difference. We don't. Well,
need my guess is it's very hard to get on all 50 state ballots. Only the libertarians have done it recently. I mean, they took them, years to get to that point. And even their candidates don't, make that much of a difference at the end of the day, usually. So I would be surprised if no labels could get on all 50. They could probably clear 40. But so if they can't get on all 50, like even if they name somebody and they make it and they give it a good go in the summer and fall, but they can't get on all 50 and they're not polling remotely well enough, do they have enough wherewithal to say, okay, forget it, we're going to drop out? Or are they so deep into this that they won't be able to pull the plug?
Probably the latter, unfortunately.
Because they claim they're an insurance policy. That's what they're. We're just an insurance policy. We're just in case people don't like Trump and Biden. We just want to put the pieces of infrastructure in place to be there for them.
Then they should make a pledge now that they'll get out if they don't meet a certain criteria at a certain point, something like that. But Bill, it's good to talk to you. I don't know if now you and I did do an interview for Washington Monthly. You interviewed me, so we have spoken, but I don't know if we've gone this long without a DMZ. And
in a while.
We went a couple of weeks without doing one, and maybe it's been a decade since since that has happened. And then we're probably going to be off for another couple of weeks. So this was your oasis here. This was if you're,
you got a vacay coming up, right?
I'm going to take a little R&R. So if you're part of the DMZ army, I hope you're sated from this, because it's going to be a little time before we get back in the swing of churning these out. You know, we are kind of the Cal Ripken of podcasts generally, but not this.
Unlike Cal Ripken, we're taking vacations.
Yes, except we don't play every
that one caveat.
We used to be the Cal Ripken, and now we are the Wally Pip of podcasting. So until next time, Bill Scher, always a pleasure.
All right, take care.
All right, see ya.